So we wanted to make sure that we have free versions, which now there's plenty of them. So there's no need to buy a style guide if you don't want to. And I provided a resource, and then Wisdom has published it. I think Wisdom, right? All the style guide that I put as a pull request into your repository.
Yeah, yes. I will also share it to them.
Okay. All right. So I'm here for an hour. So you guys feel free to ask me any questions that you want, but I will introduce myself and I will share my screen while I do this. So I will start sharing my screen and I'll show you a collection of resources that I have created for you. And Wisdom, if you have the link to this same material on your blog, you can share it. I made this available for Wisdom to use and to change however you all see fit. But the thing about me is I love style guides. I collect style guides. And so what I'm sharing on my screen right now is my personal GitHub, and I have a TechCom repository, and then I created a resource called Style Guide. So you can click into this resource at any time and you can learn about it. Now, for me, I love style guides. So I'll make this page a little bit bigger. So no matter what kind of monitor you're looking at, a style guide just helps you know how to do something when there's more than one choice. So we have all the grammar rules. I joined one of your calls a couple weeks ago. You were all hanging around on a Friday night and you were learning about sentence structure. And that was so interesting to see how detailed that talk was. So a style guide doesn't talk about those things. What it talks about are choices when there's more than one way to do something. So what I think of is a style guide contains a set of standards for writing and designing content to help maintain a consistent style, voice, and tone across any of the content that you create. So they contain rules, best practices, punctuation guidelines, text formatting guidance, and more. So you see this highlight on the screen that I'm showing. After text formatting guidance, this is a highlight of a comma, and that comma is called the serial comma, and it's also known as the Harvard comma. That's something that shows up in a style guide because whether you have a comma there or not, they're both correct, but you just want to be consistent, so you do the style guide. So why do you want to use the style guide? You want to have one set. Canonical just means one. You want to have one set of guidelines to create clear, concise, and consistent technical content for your intended audience. So this Write the Docs is a great way to find more resources about style guides. And you can click in there, and I put the link in your meeting here too. And there's a whole section of style guides. And in fact, on one of the conferences, we all got together on writing day and we created this resource. So this is a lot of great information about style guides. It's a good place to go and a good place to learn about resources. And if you don't know about Write the Docs, you'll want to meet them. It's a global community of people who care about documentation. It doesn't mean you have to be a technical writer. You could be a UX writer, a UI writer, a developer, because wherever you go, you want to have information about technical content. So I collect them. I used to have paper copies, as I mentioned. I collect them for reference, inspiration, and to look for models. And a model is kind of the way I think of finding somebody else who does something I want to do, and that looks good, so I'm going to use it. So the one I use the most is a Google Developer Documentation Style Guide. So this particular style guide is free for everybody. It has a really good user interface, and I bookmark it, and I use it all the time. So when you look at this Google Developer Documentation Style Guide, this is what Google uses for all of their products. It provides editorial guidelines. And they also have things that help you learn about highlights, voice and tone, text formatting, and word list. So it's very interesting how you can look into this one style guide And it gives you all kinds of third-party references that you might want to do. And you can see they're even referencing the Apple style guide and the Red Hat style guide. And if they have something different for a Google phone, I own a Google phone. That's for the Android documentation and anything for Google Cloud. So they are using icons and they tell you. And then it talks about rules. So it's just funny that it has guidelines, not rules. So it's okay not to follow it if it does when you can do content. And as you look at the style guide, if you think it's interesting, you can actually provide feedback and you can say, yes, that was easy to understand. And if you wanted to tell them more, you could provide more feedback. So this is really great. So some of the things that I look for a lot when I'm writing my content and when I'm giving feedback on other people's content is I don't want to just tell them it's a way to do something because I like it. So if I am editing a document in GitHub for some of the content that I work on, I try to tell them, we're not going to want to use please because we don't want to have to ask somebody to do something. It's fine to have the right tone and content. So you can look up their voice and tone, and you want to make sure that you follow these guidelines and not to use words like simply or it's simple or it's easy or quickly. So some of these things people might not know, and they're like, oh, it's simple. Just do these 3 things and your web page will be published, or whatever technical content you're writing to help somebody achieve a goal. So style guides have all kinds of information, but I often ask my writers to remove the word please. And so if I want to do that, I can say, oh, it's not just that I want them to remove please. So then I can go out here and I can copy a link to this section and I can provide them I can provide them information about why they shouldn't. And so then you can come in here and you can get some examples. So the style guide that I use the most is the Google style guide. And it's so interesting. Like, I don't like it when people use currently. So when somebody writes and it's talking about new or currently, well, next month it's not new. And currently is always assumed to be the case. Sometimes people will want to say things like, this bug will be fixed in a future release. You can't say that because you don't actually know if it'll be fixed. You can just say we're working on it or something. But it gives you all kinds of information that you can do. So one of the things that's a highlight in here, it's really, really important. Here's the thing about don't pre-announce anything. Avoid trying to document future features. And so by giving a link to the style guide, when I provide feedback on some content, it really does add some credibility to my opinion. So you can see the style guide is pretty amazing. So let's say we want to talk about release notes. And if you wanted to talk about release notes in this style guide, you can see it said, oh, what's new? So you can see that they're talking about how to do release notes. Google has their own release notes in here. So you can see trending practices that are being documented on how you could do something and if there's different guidance. So you can see they make updates quite a bit. And there's a philosophy behind this guide. And really, it just talks about that it's for Google and it's a set of best practices. It is not intended to compete with other style guides. And it doesn't replace your own style guide or any other follow style guide. And it is not a complete set of basic writing guidelines. But what the style guide is it's just giving you a way to be able to search for and find style decisions and what Google uses for theirs. So in my own work, at my job, I have a style guide and I also have a word list. So like if we spell a word a certain way, I wanted to make sure that we always spell it the same way, because some words are just spelled like Web3. How do we spell Web3? Is it a capital W? Is it a lowercase w? And those things can be searched all the time. And if you have a word list, then you know. So I actually have this bookmarked on my own thing, a word list. So here's Google's word list. So here is a project that I'm working on now, my Elesto Docs word list, and I just made it searchable at the top. So let's say I wanted to talk about Web3. So we decided Web3 is a lowercase w, and it has a 3 without it. But how would you know? And then whitelist, that's not really a politically correct word. So instead, we encourage our developers to use allow list. And it's really very simple to create a word list that you could refer to. So this is specific to this particular project that I'm working on. I have a really interesting job working with a global team of people doing identity, self-sovereign identity technology to use the Cosmos ecosystem in the blockchain world. So a lot of these things really have a very specific way that we want to talk about it. So this is a really short word list. It doesn't have very many things at all. These are just the ones that we want to be able to use. But if you look at the Google word list, they have all kinds of things in here, like file name. Sometimes when you're writing file name, don't you like to think, oh, is file name one word or is file name 2 words? I have to look it up all the time. Even though I've been a technical writer for, I have to say, many more years than many of you have even been born. I started writing in the 1980s. Some of the things that you want to look at in the word list are set up. So it's like, I always have to look it up every single time. So is setup, is it one word or is it 2? It's something that you wanted to check. It's easy to just come into this Google Developer Style Guide, and you can see setup is the noun or the adjective, and setup as a verb is 2 words. So the way I think of it is setup is a verb, it's action, and I'm like, oh, I act on 2 words. But I have to say, I look it up very often, and those are the things I do all the time. And when you want to think about writing for a global audience, you don't have to remember everything. You just come here and you look something up. So that's just a brief introduction of my favorite style guide and some of the questions that come across. You know how sometimes you're reading and somebody will be writing, when you click this, the software product will do this, and you hear the word will in there. You don't want to do that. You just want to say, click this, and this happens. You can use present tense even when it's a future action of the product. So is any of this interesting to you guys? You could talk or you could type it into your chat.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So I know that's, to me, I can talk about style guides all day long. So I really love style guides, and part of my job is to edit everything at work. So at work, we have more developers than we have writers. In fact, I'm our only writer, and I edit messages that show up on the terminal for command line help. I get to edit descriptions of commands. I get to edit the API docs. I get to edit any content that shows up. We also are starting a blog. I get to edit our blogs. And in addition, I get to do traditional technical writing, but something that I always rely on is I always rely on style guides, because I don't have to remember. I don't even have to remember how to spell setup. I just look it up every time. And I think it's really important to know that using a style guide is perfectly fine. And it is expected that you would know how to look something up. So if you don't know how to do something, you don't need to. You could just look it up. The trick is being able to know that there is a place to look it up. So when you talk about even text formatting, like how often when you're looking at a document and you can see the UI elements, which is like the name of a window or the name of a field, and you can see like something, it is bold here, but it's not bold here. So it's more helpful when you scan it, you know how to format the text. And it gives you just really very simple guidance. So I love looking at this all day long. I could just look at my style guide as I'm working. And in fact, when somebody says, "What do you do?" I say, "Oh, I'm a technical writer." And really, I probably write less than 10% of the time. The other 90% is figuring out how to work the thing to write about it, but also how to be consistent and how to use the resources that are available. So, who has worked on content recently where they had some kind of questions about style guides? You don't have to be shy. I know it's late Friday night for you guys.
All right, guys. So has anybody worked on that?
I have.
Just meeting the first time, so I'm just really very curious about it.
It is. And just so you guys know more about me, I'll let you know on this style guide, you can learn more about me. I'll just show you something else. Oh, that's my mom. Sorry, I forgot to turn my phone off. My mom lives around the corner from me here in Florida. Something about Linktree. Linktree is just a way to collect links. And so I have my Linktree. So if you have the link to the style guide, you have a link to all of this. And then you can see that I collect style guides. So it's so important to me that I actually put it on my Linktree. And then I also have a list of technical documentation sites that I think are awesome. Some of the times almost every time. In fact, let me just say, every good interview should always ask you, well, what kind of docs do you like? And then when you look at the docs and what you like, I should actually probably move this to my GitHub. But when you look at some of the docs, you want to have a good idea of what a good document looks like. And then you can see a style guide could include things like a glossary. And then you can see that it's searchable on the right. And then if your window shrinks, it's adaptive and it moves. But all of this is defined by a style guide. And you see, this looks great because it's clean. It has the right styles applied. It has good, simple language. The sentences are not too long, even though it's very hard. So part of what I do is I collect my style guides. I keep track of stuff that I like. I also know what documents I think look really good. And CockroachDB, a guy who I used to work with now, works here now. Look how good this looks. You can just go right to these cards right on theirs, and it gives you a really good example. And you know how they got here? They got here because they had a guide that followed, that told them. So for instance, in the table column, do you want to have, like over here, it's called the ORR framework, and it's a capital F, that's a product name. But over here, it has a lowercase l. So you can see this is called sentence case. So the sentence case is available here. And then if we come over here and we look back at the Google documentation style guide, this is my favorite one all the ways. And let's say I don't remember how to do heading capitalization. And so here is the capitalization rules. So I'm in favor of sentence case in my heading of my docs, just like they use here. So this T is lowercase and this H is lowercase. That's my preference. But some people use something called title case. So if you look at some of this example apps, you can see like this A in the apps, that's capital because the page name uses title case. But that's hard to remember. How do you remember when to use lowercase, when to use uppercase? So you can see all of these things have title cases here. But I mean, that's something you decide. It doesn't matter what you want to do. But why is the title capital And then why is this task title lowercase? That's more complicated. So what I like is just to pick one and stick with it. So if I have influence at a place that I work, I encourage them to always use the same capitalization. You know what's another good trick is I should add this actually. There's something called capitalize my title. So let's say I don't know if the word to, that's something that I always don't remember. So title case, you don't have to capitalize to. But if you use sentence case, hello, uppercase. Oh, it froze, I think. Sorry about that, you guys. We're having issues here. But, oops, sorry. I don't know why this didn't work. It says, oh, I'll exit the page. But anyway, this capitalized my title. It's a pretty handy site. I haven't had it locked before, but I'm on this multiple times a day to try to figure out how exactly, like the word the, you don't have to capitalize the unless it's at the beginning of the sentence. And the word a, do you capitalize a? How about of? So I don't have to remember all those things. I just have to remember how to look these up. So what kind of questions have you come across in your work where you might want to learn how to look something up? I see peculiar. You're thinking about something, right?
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is the kind of challenge I come across most of the times when I write is like starting the article.
Yeah.
That's the first introduction, which I feel should be something like inviting. So some of the times I find that kind of challenging, trying to figure out how do I start up this so that uh, someone looking at it or reading it can be, I mean, inviting or something. So
Right.
that's
So
it.
see that might fall outside of a style guide because a style guide is just a set of best practices in grammar. But what I think I hear you saying is how to have a really strong summary or abstract. So when a person drills into maybe perhaps a blog article, they know what it is. So let's just look at about this guide. So about this guide, this one right here, it tells you that's a good introduction. You're there. And it says, hey, if you're new to this guide and you're looking at somewhere to start, you can do it. So, what I like about this particular introduction, it says, hey, this is it. Okay, great. It gives you some really good consistency guidelines, but then you know where to start. So, this would be one way to think about it. And you could say, oh, yeah, this is it. And I like this key point thing that they use a lot, an overview of some of the highlights. And then it gives you links on where to go, maybe further in your article or somewhere else. And when you want to write for a global audience, and it gives you information. But one way that I like as a reader is to do this. Now, somebody who I like a lot, who writes a lot of blogs, is somebody who works for our company. So I'm not signed in right now because I am in the middle of creating a medium for our new job. But let's say I want to look for somebody called Christina Combin. She's like one of my favorite blog writers in the blockchain world. So if you look at all the articles that talks about Christina, I really do like the stuff that she does. So how do you look up? Oh, those are her followers. How do you guys look up something? So these are things that are published. I'll just show you. I think we're still using blogignite.com. Ignite.com blog, sorry. Okay, so here is some of our blogs that I think are really strong with starting And so, like, how do you want to describe something really challenging? You always give a good headline, and this is just like a little summary or a sub headline. But I really like that the very first thing she does, this was a hard blog to write because we had 160 people working, and then we got down to 40 something people. So this was a really difficult blog that talked about layoffs and restructuring. And so what she started out doing is she said, hey, look, we went through a rebrand, but we also did great things. We built and maintained it. We gave it a lot of love. But then it talked about, we have to share some bad news. So, I mean, this is one article that I think was a good way, what you're talking about. And then some of the other things that got written, this is another guy who was working for us. You just introduce what the goal is, and then you talk about it. I don't have a lot of experience writing the blog posts that many of you do. I have seen some of Wisdom's, I know. But one of the things as a reader that I like is I like the headline to mean something really compelling. And I like it to talk about what it's going to talk about. And then I like it to tell me right away. And then it says, what else does this happen? And then it goes into the rest. So some of the stuff that she's working on now isn't published yet, but you'll read about the new company that I'm working for. It's called Anamika Labs, and that'll be published sometime in the next month. But we'll see a lot more from Christina coming up. But it's so interesting when you think about it. And another one of the Cosmos blog. So I don't have this bookmarked, but the Cosmos blog, when I first started working in blockchain, here's how I came. And you can see there's community submitted posts too. So if you had some interest in the Cosmos blog, you could contribute on the community. But if you look at some of this stuff, it talks about all kinds of things you can do. But these are good examples of the domain that I'm working in these days. And you could just see, follow along as we explain. And this one, it's like, read more. I don't understand that one. But I do like, that's what this is. This doesn't have a subheading. So this is just talking about different things. So you could see that this one was a couple years ago, but it showed up first because it had a lot of activity and it was in the main part of the blog. So I don't have much blog experience. If you look at,
disappeared.
Say that again?
I can't see your screen.
Oh, no? Oh, you guys.
Back.
Okay, let me try this again. Thank you for saying something. I've been out here sharing all kinds of stuff.
No, I've been seeing your screen all this while, though.
Okay, how about now? Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks for saying that.
Yes.
I can go back over anything you want. Now, one of the things I do is on the home exchange, I do a thing where I swap houses and stuff. And I put some, this is my little pitiful blog. And it's just this is mine. And it just is like, hey, I wrote this blog because I get a lot of questions about it. But some of the things that I was showing you earlier that I didn't show you if my screen wasn't shared, thanks so much for calling me out on that. Being able to just go out here and look at Cosmos. So in Cosmos, it's a really interesting space in the blockchain and the crypto world that uses the Atom token and other tokens. But these are blogs that I follow and that I think these are really pretty well written and give some really good examples. And what I like as a reader is I like being able to have a call to action at the end. So, gives you a call to action. Why do you want to do that? And then at the end, it'll say, how do you do that? And then you want to make sure that you do it. And then it says, make sure you visit. And it gives you a call to action at the end. So for me as a reader, that's what I like. So in addition to having a good opening, I like to have a real strong closing. But that's not the same for all the technical documentation. So the technical documentation, each piece serves a different purpose. So every page should always be page 1, but that's how we do it. But for me, all of these collections of style guides, I used to start by keeping them here in a Google Doc. And of course, now we have the style guides that I shared at the link is the style guides are available in Wisdom's blog too. Wisdom, do you have your link to your project?
Yes, I've already shared that already to them.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to go back. And for everybody. So he's
We can't hear you.
you're the wise arm of God. Is that who you are? But see, this is what we're talking about. And so for me, just, style guides are just a way to keep track of what you want to do. And there's so many style guides. So when you look at style guides, you can have all kinds of different ones. But if you're interviewing for a role, one of the things that you want to do is you want to be able to talk about style guides and how you can use them to make sure that the content you deliver is consistent and follows the best practices for that intended audience. But there's all kinds of style guides. These are just the ones that apply to the work that I do. There's probably hundreds of style guides. In the old days, I would use the Microsoft Writing Style Guide, but this is more really about grammar. And this one is actually referred to a lot. And if you even just look at the top 10 tips, you want to have bigger ideas but fewer words. And so it just gives you really good ways to think about writing. So the Microsoft Style Guide is more about writing than it is about consistency for best practices. But I like it a lot. I mean, it tells you some really good ideas. Get to the point fast. And it talks about things like it's okay to use it's and let's. It's all right to use contractions. When I first started writing professionally decades ago, we were not encouraged to use informal language. And here it is again about capitalization. I'm all about not capitalizing things you don't need to, and it talks about all kinds of things like don't put a period at the end of a heading. All of these things are just really important things to think about when you do it. But this would be a good thing for people who are just getting into starting and talking about doing your content planning. So I know that one of us were talking earlier about how do you have a really strong opening. You can look at this content planning section and find out the audience and the goal. Who wants to read it and why do they want to read it? So for me, those are really key points. But I really think that style guides just give us so many ways that we could be sure that we're all going to be following the same guidelines for the same content. So when you get assignments to write blog posts, do they give you guidelines for the grammar? Anybody?
No, I haven't.
And so do they edit your work and do they show you what changes they made or do you just hand it off?
They do edit.
Yeah, it's good if you can have a dialogue with your editor and find out what guidelines are being applied and what changes they might make. So I think it's hard to be a writer. Everybody says, oh, writing, and that must just be easier than being a programmer or developer. But actually, it's just as complex and just as difficult with just as many rules. And being able to understand the goal of the product and the technology or the message that you're doing is takes a really lot longer than you think to write. So you'll say, oh, I could just write 3 pages. That'll be okay. And that could take a week. I mean, if you do a really good job, later it might take 3 days or maybe later 2 days, but it always takes longer than you think. And having access to all of these style guides, I think, are just really super awesome. So, different style guides serve different purposes. So, for people who are just starting, that might be okay to think about using the Microsoft Style Guide because this is a really great. They have their own word list. You can see word lists are really important. But like when you talk about 2D and 3D, and when you talk about 24/7 and how you do it, I mean, these are just kind of interesting. So you can have date and time terms. Something that comes up a lot for me when I'm looking at user interfaces is, do you want to put a space in the times? And the style is yes. And the Microsoft style is to use a capital A and an M. But if we go back here and we look at the Google Developer Style Guide, let's see if we look up time. And then you can see dates and times. Let's see how Google does it. They also have a space. So, and then globally, you use a colon, but in Europe, they like to use a dot, 3:45 p.m. And if you need to know how to do things and how to express dates, it's really good to just have somewhere to look to get at it. And then why we prefer dates that are written out, because this could be May 4th or it could be April 5th, right? So it just could mean something different. And so when you do have this, how do you even talk about times of the year? The other day, somebody said, hey, happy autumn equinox. And I'm like, in the northern hemisphere, but in the southern hemisphere, it's a vernal equinox. So you can't talk about terms like spring. So you don't want to talk about the word spring when you're giving examples in the content that you write. You want to talk about the month because spring is not the same all over the world. So see here, they're talking about that October, and here, and we might think it's okay to talk about fall, but it's not fall all over the world when it's October. But I look up things all the time for units of measure. When you look here, if you can see, I don't know if this is big enough for everybody, but this is called a non-breaking space. So what Google recommends is not to separate the unit of measure from the value. And so that way 25 will always stay with millimeters. So not to roll it together. Like other places that I've worked, they have said, yes, don't put those together. Oops. And so it just gives you some ideas how to write about currency, how to write about leaving out the degree symbol, how to do ranges of units. So not to use the hyphen, but instead to spell out 2 and to put the C in between there. So really, you just want to make sure. So like here, it talks about thousands. You don't want to have a space in between like you do for AM and PM. But it really is so helpful for me. Every day when I work, I look at this Google Developer Documentation Style Guide. If I don't find what I'm looking for, I will go next to the Microsoft style because that's more about writing, and that might be helpful for those of you who are launching things. And it even gives you information about quotation marks and why you should have a quotation mark after the period. You'll see often that people like to have a phrase in quotation marks and they put the punctuation after. But this will help you do that. You don't have to remember everything. You just have to remember to look it up. So what other kind of style guide questions are keeping you guys up at night?
All right, guys. So any question for Barry so far?
I know it's late on a Friday night, but you guys are going to want to have a style guide, right? Thank you, Joswil, for at least coming and talking. I know it's so late for those of you who have already had your supper on a Friday. Yes, Gozi, it's true. The writer should understand the style before starting on technical writing. You don't have to. You can write anything you want, but as you write it, it's really helpful to have a style guide that you can reference to check, because there's a lot of different ways to do things right. Doing something different than a style guide is fine. It's fine. You just want to be in there. So here, somebody's saying, what about LinkedIn? I have so many of Wisdom's friends who are my LinkedIn. Here's my link tree, you guys. And in that link tree, it talks about my LinkedIn, and you can see the different places that I've worked and what I've done. But when you look at the style guides, I'll just give you an overview of how this works for me. So right now, I'm technically still under Ignite. Now we have a spinoff to something new that's also in the Web3 space. In these two roles, I use the Google Developer Documentation Style Guide. Then you could add the skills here. And then when I was at Instabase, this was a financial software. And so I also was doing developer documentation, but a lot of our users were financial, so I leaned on the Microsoft. And then at DataStax, this was an in-house. So I know somebody said, how do you create one? You don't have to create one. You could just use the ones that are published already, but if somewhere that you work or a project that you're working on is different, you can just document the exceptions. That's what I do. And the same thing here too at Rocket Software. And then at VCE Software. So Rocket Software, they had their own style guide. They were very particular about how all the products and the terms were referenced. But when you look at all of these things, you can see I've worked at a lot of places for a lot of different years. And at almost every interview, it comes up, how do you help your content be consistent? Or what style guide do you want to use? But all of this. So at IBM, I got the chance to work there for more than 3 years. And that really was my best writing learning in my whole career, because they had editors. And I loved my editors. In fact, I'm still friends with some of them, and I hear them in my ears. So when you talk about something about releases. So let's say if you want to talk about releases, do you talk about earlier or you talk about less than? So I think if I had to look this up, I wouldn't know. Let's say I want to do earlier. So I would look in the word list, and then I would come here to the E's, earlier, used for a range of versions. But it does say for the phone, don't use earlier for a range of version numbers, and use lower. But at IBM, we used earlier. So, I mean, you just have to know what it is that you're looking at. And, same thing for later. So if you want to look up later, it gives you the same information. Use it for a range of version numbers, but not higher. This comes up in almost every software project when you're writing about specific requirements, if you have it. So a release with the highest number might not be the latest. So you want to just make sure that you look up the terms that you have a question on. So you don't have to study a style guide. You don't have to really master a style guide. The most important thing is just to know about them and to love them. And it takes time as you're writing content. But what I do when I start a project is I just write a list of all the terms. And then I want to make sure I use the same term the same way in the same article or the same content, so that we're always talking about something consistently, because those won't be in the style guide because they don't know the terms for the domain that you're writing about. Yeah, I see some people are like, oh yeah, we're going to gradually get there. And are there ways to practice what we learned today? sample documentations to try and work on and improve. Yes. Do you know there's something really great that Google has? The Google technical writing. Is it a technical writing course that's free? There's this thing on technical writing courses. So I always like to recommend that people can practice this technical writing for developers. But this would be really great if you wanted to study technical writing, to learn more about the technical writing role. Don't forget that this is for developers. So not all technical writing would be for people who develop software. But yes, I mean, this is a really great thing. Learn about this, review your technical writing resources, and it gives you all kinds. And look, it even here it talks about an editorial style guide. And look, it also gives the top 2, which are my top 2, because that's my target audience for mine. So if you have these things to practice, and then on Write the Docs, by the way, do you guys know that Write the Docs has a free Slack? Are you guys in Write the Docs? Because in the Write the Docs, there's a style guides channel. And somebody here was saying, how do you do sub steps? Is it 1-1? Is it 1-2? And then people can, they give another style guide for readability guidelines. And then somebody talked about using emojis in documentation. So using a style, I see Olise has a question. Using a style guide in documentation, is it determined by the writer or the company giving the contract? It's a really good question to ask during the negotiation of your project is, what standards do you follow? What style guide do you use? And if they don't give you one, use Google and use Microsoft. Look at their current content. Notice how they capitalize things. And you can see there's a lot of questions about style guides in this Write the Docs. And there's an open source channel. And in the open source channel and in this career advice channel, it's really good for people who are breaking into the technical writing. Here's Community Help Wanted. Like here's a project out here that says, hey, who wants volunteers? So if any one of you wanted to volunteer, I would say join the Write the Docs on Slack, introduce yourself here in intros, and then come out here and look in Community Help Wanted, look in open source. I mean, there is a way to practice. It's a lot harder to practice without a specific assignment. I'm not good at all of that. Link to the Slack channel. Okay, here's my link tree again, which is in the link. And then here is the Write the Docs community of people. And here's a link to the Slack. So Wisdom and I keep in touch on the Write the Docs Slack, which is a really great space to keep in touch on. So Write the Docs Slack, it's free to join right now. I think later we might have a membership fee, but they have a lot of job postings, but they also have job posts only here in the Write the Docs Slack. And there's jobs posted every day. A lot of these are for senior people, but I saw a junior position too posted earlier this week, I think. But it's just good to know who's hiring and what they're looking at. And staff level means it's a very high level. But when you talk about a job description, it's good to just see what is in a job description, and how you can just translate a job description into the skills that you want to build. So, I mean, all of the things are available. There's just so much. You don't want to try to do too much when you're getting started, but a good place to start is just to become a member of a community that resonates with you. For me, it's Cosmos, that's my work. And for me to be on Write the Docs, that for me, and like here's Florida. So on Florida, we host these little meetups. So there might be meetups. I know like we had with Wisdom here, we all got to be together and it was no charge to any of us. I mean, how wonderful that we all get to be here doing that. And this is just fun. It's just fun to be in there. So those are great questions. So do you guys have anything else? You can tell I'm really, really excited about all this. And here's my link tree. Remember, the link tree is also free. You guys could make your own link tree. And all this is a collection of docs. But when people ask me, do you have a portfolio? I'm like, oh, no, I really don't have one. And I've never needed one in my job, but it might be different now for different types of things. But I use my link tree as a way to just share a bunch of information without having a portfolio. And it works on a nice mobile device too. Another kind of an interesting thing is the Good Docs Project. If you guys don't know about that, now they switched now. Oh, look at that. They are now and GitLab. I think I knew that. I have to update my link tree. So the Good Docs Project it's a free volunteer-led community of resources for templates. So look, they have information about glossaries and how to manage your glossary. And it's a project that's been going on for a couple of years, but this is all done by volunteers. And so they have a lot of templates. So it's just interesting. You can see a lot of things that are going on here with the Good Docs Project. So, and then you could be a contributor and technology and the tools registry. I know you guys are probably talking about tools too and how you can work with different things, but I just love what I do, and I hope you guys have as much fun doing it too.
Yeah, sure. So already I've been receiving messages in our private chat. Everybody's very much happy. They say the class is fire, and they have learned a lot within just this few hours. It is more like 3 minutes to 1 hour, more like. So they really enjoyed the class and they have learned a lot. And thank you so much for your time. And even with COVID, you still find your time to.
Yeah, I have COVID, you guys, and a hurricane. So, but that doesn't mean I don't love all of you and Style Guides. And we all don't get to have an editor in the room with us at all the times. But what you can do is just be curious and look things up and keep looking things up. Bookmark your favorite topics.
All right.
So
thank you so much for your time, and we wish you quick recovery. Yeah. So let us send claps to her because she's and she still find time to come speak to us.
Okay, Peculiar has a question.
All right, Peculiar, question. So let's just take one question, then we can close up. So Peculiar can go on.
I'm good.
You say?
Oh, you're good. Okay, see, we answered your question. You guys.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you for attending the class, and thank you so much, Barry, for your time. And we wish you quick recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Wisdom, for hosting us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.